Tony Gosling is an investigative journalist who joins us to share with us his thoughts on this. Tony Gosling, why do you think the U.S. decided at this point, even though it's been in the works for a while, it appears, to designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization or part of it as a terrorist entity?
Well, it may be because the Iranians are having difficulties trying to cope with the floods, and it's maybe a good time to knife them in the back, metaphorically. Whilst, basically, I think moves like this are designed to psychologically to attack a nation's morale. That's really all they can do, because militarily, I think Iran is actually very strong. I mean, I've met some of the Revolutionary Guards. I found them extremely professional, much more professional, I must say, than people from the MI5 here in the UK that I met, who are the secret services in Britain, and a great sense of humour, real professional guys. I mean, what we're seeing here, of course, is just an extension of the war crimes from the United States, an attempt to prepare for a regime change in Iran. This is a war crime, and the United States is a mafia state, so it doesn't seem to care whether it's another war crime. I think they're bent, the United States, the deep state anyway. Of course, the ordinary people are not interested in any of this, but the deep state in America is hell-bent on world domination, just like Adolf Hitler. They've got drunk on power, and they see themselves as a dying empire. But, I mean, it's like declaring London's famous, people from all over the world come to photograph in Whitehall at Horse Guards Parade, the Lifeguards and the Coldstream Guards as terrorists. It's beyond a joke. The US Navy SEALs, are they terrorists? They are working directly for the military of a legitimate state, which has a very secure status under international law and under the United Nations. So really this is just an attempt at bullying, regime change, and that sort of thing.
It appears that even within the U.S.'s military ranks, including the Pentagon, that they have not only at this time or at this juncture, but also prior, to have advised against designating the IRGC as a terrorist organization. Again, something that the U.S. has mulled, it appears, for almost a decade at this point. And some have come out and saying that really ratchets attention up in the region. Do you think that this will lead to insecurity in the region? And furthermore, do you think that this risks going into a military playing field or landscape?
Well, I think most of us have realized over the last 30 years that the United States government, the Pentagon, cares not a jot for any kind of security in the Middle East. In fact, there's been a massive death toll of, some say, more than 1 million, but certainly at least 1 million as a result of many of these horrendous US interventions. But look, let's not forget that there is an active US Pentagon campaign to kill as many Republican guards as possible. There was a bomb attack on the Republican guards on the 14th of February, which killed, I think now it's 30 of them were killed. I mean, just imagine if there was a bomb attack at Horse Guards Parade in London and 30 of the lifeguards for Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth had been killed. Of course, this would have been all over the news, all over the world. But in the Western press, this attack on the Revolutionary Guards on 14th of February got virtually no coverage and certainly no context. I think the driving force behind this is really what's fueling much of this hatred in the US deep state and elite against Iran is the Christian Zionists. Some of these hate preachers, I would call them, they believe that the Mahdi, who is the Iranian hero of the future, prophesied in the Quran, is in fact the Antichrist. So I don't even know if they believe it, but that's what they keep telling people. And this has a really poisonous effect on many of the people who may be nominal Christians involved in the US military and decision makers, and they actually believe that they're doing a good thing by killing any state which is an Islamic state. And of course we've seen something like, well, I believe something like 1.5 million Muslims killed, some say even more, since the beginning of the war on terror, which started with the 9/11 attack. So I think it's important now to reflect on this decision and to look at some of the context under which this murderous campaign has been going on ever since 2001 of the 9/11 attacks, and the beginning with George Bush of this totally misconceived war on terror, which really is just an attempt to have an alliance with Israel and grab as much land as possible in the Middle East, despite whatever the cost may be.
And finally, the statements coming from the U.S. Point to the fact that perhaps this is not meant to or to take a military turn. For example, Pompeo, even in his opening statements on this, when he announced it in the past 24 hours, said that this is meant to squeeze the economy in turn, since the IRGC has obviously dealings within Iran's economy. What makes the U.S. think that Iran or any other entity is going to fall for the statement? At this point, much of the IRGC higher-ups have been sanctioned. Banks associated with them have been sanctioned. Money can't even get into Iran to pay for flood victims. We're experiencing the worst floods ever in this country's history. So I'm not too sure, again, based on reactions coming from what we're seeing here from the social media, based on Pompeo, that this is going to squeeze Iran's economy. How much more do they want to squeeze this economy?
Well, they're just looking to put psychological pressure as a pre-regime change mean. But look, I mean, the timing, you asked me about that earlier, but also very important, of course, coinciding with today's elections in Israel. This will be sending a message that the strong men can win. It's also about people who are voting today over in Israel thinking, well, the US is behind the policies, the extreme right policies of Netanyahu, the racist policies of Netanyahu, and the United States is backing him. So it's likely to help Netanyahu in today's poll, which is absolutely horrific and very, very, it's a very, very cynical way of doing things. So, I reckon that this is going to also not be taken seriously by literally 90% of the world's governments, probably 95% of the world's populations. What they're doing really is they're on a hiding to nothing, because it's only them, that is to say the deep state in the US and Israel, and here in Britain, of course, that actually believes their own propaganda. This propaganda is starting to be paper thin and very, very easy to see through.